Hi guys, today I thought I'd talk a little bit about the use of TV displays, iPads, computers, and so forth to enhance the ability to show what your layout is doing, keep track of things on the layout, etc. We'll start with this large screen display, which is acting as just a second monitor for my laptop computer, which is mounted on the workbench over here. You can see it was laid out in JMRI. And this TV screen is just an extension of that laptop, which allows us to see the entire layout. This is a double track layout that runs completely around the layout. It has two levels and half of the track is hidden, which I'll show you in just a minute. In addition to the use of the display here to keep track of where the trains are located, indicated by the red lines. There are currently two trains on the layout in various locations. But we also can make use of iPads for a variety of things. This particular iPad is one of the larger ones. It's a Pro, and it is currently set up to monitor all of the turnouts and so forth that are associated with this yard located right here and leading into the engine facility. In addition to that display, we'll also talk a little bit about the use of iPads for running the trains. To start off with, I'd just like to introduce you to the entire layout, which is basically, looks like a dog bone, except that there is a hidden track that is the return track of the dog bone, so that basically the upper level of the layout runs from one helix to another helix. That particular helix that we're looking at right now is covered and will eventually be turned into a town with all kinds of scenery put up there to cover up the fact that there's something hidden underneath. The initial helix, both of them were built exactly the same. They're hand built here, and they form the basis for going from the upper level of the layout. We can go all the way around, down the other side to the lower level, which you can see underneath. There's a staging yard at one point, and it runs all the way around. Eventually there'll be a staging yard on the other side, and then it hooks up again to this helix where the trains return to the upper level. In addition, there are a couple of yards, this being the major one with the engine facility and the freight switching yard and so forth. On the other side, I'm developing more of a passenger terminal with the station, and this will be the major support for the town that will be built in the background and around here. And eventually there'll be some other industries over off of that siding with another table to be added back there. Most likely there'll be a power plant and a coal handling facility. So that's the gist of the layout. It's based in northern Ohio, based on Norfolk Southern routes, and it's laid out along the Lake Erie, the shores of Lake Erie near Vermilion, Ohio, about 30 miles west of Cleveland. When I first started the layout, I did a very conventional thing. I went forward with switch panels to operate all the turnouts. Some had different LEDs, which are too bright, need to be changed, and eventually will be. But basically all around the fascia, I included the switch panels for manual control of all the turnouts. I also did something when I started building this about 2 years ago. I made the decision that I was going to go with the Smale unit, which is basically a tortoise with the decoder built inside. I've made a video elsewhere that shows how to hook these up and a very easy installation method for either tortoises or Smales. You might look that up if you're at all interested. But with the use of this SMAIL, I can address all of these turnouts in a variety of ways. The SMAIL allows for push button control via a couple of connections on here. These do not have to be powered all the time. The SMAIL gets its power through the track power. And with the use of the push buttons, that allows us to control all of the turnouts with a single push button in each direction, and then using the contacts on the SMAIL, you can indicate the lights as to which direction the turnout is set, whether it's set thrown or set closed for the main line. So that was how I initially went. I had no intention of ever going beyond that. However, after watching some other videos, specifically I'll mention Rhythm Railroad, who has done a variety of videos on his very creative methods of building the model railroad. He initially had used the iPads and bigger displays on his railroad, and it intrigued me, and I did a little bit of studying and found out that I really liked the idea of using these displays. This is an example of the yard that I showed you earlier, that's right below the display. And with that display, which is all generated within JMRI, it's not that difficult, even though it looks difficult. And in future videos, I'll show you how to do that. But with this display, one of the beauties of the SMAIL machine that I just mentioned is that through JMRI, you can control the turnouts by just a touch on the touch screen right here. It's a little difficult to watch the video and hit the right spot. But as you make the turnout change position, you'll see that it actually displays which way the turnout is set. And in fact, the turnout is controlled. That's the one we're looking at. And if we go down to the switch panel, the amber light shows that it is in fact changed to the siding as displayed in the diagram above. If we change it back by pushing up here, it will change colors on the panel because those are done with the contacts on the SMAIL. This could be done with the tortoise, but you would need to add a decoder to it. So the beauty of this is that you can make all of these turnout controls easy to see up here, whereas on the old diagrams, it's a little harder to figure out what you wanted. For example, here, if I want to set the switch to go into the yard, it's pretty easy to see that that's what I have to do. If I want to access this, it's pretty easy. Again, you got to hit the right spot on the panel. I'm not doing a very good job of it there. Now you can see that the turnouts are closed. For the route to come down here, to come off of the secondary line that would lead into the yard. So that was really interesting to me. When I first saw this, I thought, well, I need to get into doing that. While this seems very, very difficult to set up, it's not. It was easy to do once I had figured out the system and once I got to working with JMRI and had the diagram drawn. It is not that complex. Doesn't require a great deal of wiring. Furthermore, it's easy to use the throttles to make the switches work. In this particular case, I'm using Digitrax, and the Digitrax will allow you, by using the switch position here, to enter the number of the switch and throw the same switch from the throttle. And all of the other indications on the diagram and on the control panel will change with throwing the throttle. I use the wireless throttle so I can be anywhere and throw the switch and everything indicates correctly, so that you have constantly a good display that anybody can use, and you have multiple places from which you can control all of your turnouts on the layout. Additionally, I use these iPads, and just so that you understand it, it's not a great investment in iPads. These two particular iPads are quite old. I think I paid less than $100 for both of them used on the internet. You cannot display the diagram on these two iPads because they're so old that the operating system will not allow you to get the diagram from JMRI. But they are perfect for running trains. Now, why would I want to have it on a fixed panel like this? As I showed you earlier in my discussion of the layout, I have a continuous run operation all the way around. And by using these throttles up here, I can set actually 4 trains with just those 2 iPads to running and control them from up there while I maybe sit and do some switching in the yard. I don't need to be constantly monitoring them once I get them set up. But one of the things that I really like about using this iPad is, first of all, this is a Y throttle. If you're not familiar with Y throttle, I'll go back and show you. These are downloadable. One is free. I think Y throttle Lite is free. If you pay for it, I think it's $9.95 or something like that. And from then on, it's available for you to use on all of your iPads, for example. And these iPads will do everything that the throttle that I just showed you will do, with the added benefit that it doesn't cost you a couple $100 for the throttle. So one of the other things I like about using this iPad is the ease of seeing what I'm doing. The throttles aren't very well lit and so forth. With these, I can I can see the numbers, I can see the setup, I can read everything very quickly. For example, with the Y throttle, you can go to your recent list of engines, and one that I recently used was this one, 9156. So I'll just set that and set it. It says it's set, and then go back to throttle. And now you can see that 9156 is indicated here. That's the throttle, that's the engine that's going to be controlled by this throttle when I increase it. Now it just so happens that that's the one that's sitting right over there. So all I have to do is push this up a little bit and it moves. That one's going backwards because that was the way I had last set it. I can change it to forward, and the train is going to start moving forward. And I can control all of the other functions of that train as well, because they have all of the buttons up here. For example, the light, the sound, I'll turn the sound on. And you can blow the horn, the bell, and everything works the same as it would from the throttle, the Digitrax throttle, but you have a nice display up here that you can utilize. Now, since I'm not going to be running the train all around, I'll shut it down, but to me it is really nice to be able to see that nice display of what engine is selected. It gives a very good display as to which direction it's going, how fast it's going, and so forth. Likewise, you could set up any other engines that you wanted to with the on the other side and run 2 complete trains with this. It's also very easy to select a consist with the Y throttle just simply by adding. If you go over here, you can put in another number and just say add it, and I'll just pick one up here, 9183, and say add it, and it'll say, is it going to run reverse or normal? And probably it would be reverse if you have it the way I run them. And then it goes in and it will show you it's 9156 plus 1, which means there's 2 engines in the consist. So with this, it's very easy. It's up here where I can see it. I'm going to release everything. Well, I guess I got to pick something first and then release it all. So now those are all released for use with other throttles. And if I go back to the throttle, you see nothing is selected. As we finish up this initial discussion of the various modern technology that we can use to enhance the enjoyment of our railroads, I'd like to get a little bit into how we actually get the display to operate. And in order to make the red lines light up as appropriate and the switches and everything move the way you want them, you have to have some way of block detection. And that involves, in Digitrax, using some kind of block detection like the BDL-168 that I show here. In this particular case, I've only used about half of the circuits that are available in that 168. Eventually they will all get used, and I'll explain that a little bit in a minute. But I have on this layout, I will have 5 different BDL-168s, and it's not because I have that many blocks that need to be detected, but because I will eventually have all of the switches, all the turnouts monitored as well. So you see here's another one of the BDL-168s that is only partially used. These units work by detecting current in the track sector that you're monitoring. So when an engine goes in there, or a car that uses electric for the lights, whatever you have a current draw, it then causes this BDL-168 to say you have something located in that sector. What that involves is cutting gaps to make sectors for your railroad. It's not that difficult. And then running the power wire for that particular block or sector back to the BDL-168 so that it can monitor when something is in that sector. It isn't that complicated. It did take a little bit of time to get it hooked up, but it's not something that is that you're going to spend a great deal of time studying and trying to get work. Using one of these, monitoring 16 different blocks with one of those, pretty simple actually. So that detector then is, the signals are sent back to JMRI to indicate that something is in that, that block. And I'll go into that in another video on how to set that up. Additionally, there is a problem with regard to the turnouts that need to be addressed, because when you initially turn on your layout and before you start using it, JMRI needs to be able to determine what the position of the switches is. In this particular case, you can see that both of those 2 turnouts are in the closed position for straight line mainline operation. On the opposite side, you see an additional 2 turnouts that don't appear to tell you anything, and actually there's a train sitting there. In this case, those turnouts are temporarily modified so that they will stay in the closed or mainline position, because I don't really have that yard built. So I haven't connected any turnout motors or anything to them. So they don't indicate anything until I get all that hooked up. But even so, when you first turn on your layout with the JMRI, JMRI does not know where those turnouts are located, whether they're in the closed or thrown position, until they get some kind of feedback. Obviously, you can go up and you can touch the turnout and make it move, that would then say, okay, now I know where it is. And you go up and touch it and move it back. I don't know why I'm having trouble touching these today, but I am. But at any rate, initially you need to get feedback to JMRI on the position of those turnouts. One of the things that I will discuss later is how to use that BDL-168 to indicate the position of the turnouts. It isn't that complex. It's relatively simple because you're just setting up a sensor that monitors current draw and will use the contacts on those switch machines, the SMAILs that I mentioned earlier, to cause a current draw through a resistor, and that will then cause that sensor to tell JMRI that the turnout is in one position or the other, and will so indicate on the diagram, and so that all the turnouts will initially be set, whereas these two are in the unknown position because I don't even have them hooked up. So that will be another topic for discussion. One further thing I'd like to mention is that in the Helixes, I wanted to be able to monitor where the trains were both up and down in the Helix. So I broke each level of the Helix into one block and set that up to be monitored through the BDL-168. So as you can see here, I've labeled each level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and as the train progresses up or down through the levels of the Helix on either side, it will indicate that that particular sector is occupied, and that will help keep track of where the trains are within the Helix. Initially, I used a video camera, and it still works, but it is not as desirable as having a positive indication that the train is in that sector. So that was another reason why I went to the block detection mode. All of this is very useful when trying to run all of their various trains, and I find it an interesting adaptation of modern technology. I particularly like the display that you get when you use for example, the diagram for the yard. And see, in this particular case, the power has been off and JMRI does not know what the position of all those turnouts. And frankly, the reason it doesn't is because I haven't hooked up all the extra sensors. That's a project I'm working on now. But as soon as I touch any of the turnouts to force them one way or the other, then JMRI knows what that position is, and it will indicate appropriately on the diagram. Using the BDL-168 as I described, we can monitor the position of those and send that information to JMRI so that when the program first starts, it will have all of the information, and all of those turnouts will indicate in the proper position. So in future videos, that's what I'll be helping you with, explaining how I hooked it up. Again, it's a process that has many ways to do each thing that you try, and so there's probably better ways to do what I've accomplished, but I will show you what I've done, try to explain it, and I will go through each of the various phases, drawing the diagrams, hooking up the turnouts so that they indicate where whether they're in thrown or closed position, hooking up the BDL-168 to display the location of trains throughout, the layout, and also some other aspects of setting this up as far as getting it to display on the iPads and on the large TV screen. So I hope you enjoyed this. If there's any particular questions you have, please leave a comment below and I'll try to get back to you. And if you have a particular aspect of it you need some help with, I'd be glad to try to address this in a future video. It will probably take me a couple weeks to get this done, but I wanted to show you some of the various aspects of the technology that can be used to enhance your model railroad. So everybody keep running the trains, and I hope you have a great day.